Okay.
Hello, and welcome to Sacred Mind Shift Circle. I'm your host, Dahlia DeVerdonald, and today I'm joined by Miry Kornhauser, a licensed psychotherapist with over 23 years of experience and the founder of Life in 360 based in Barcelona. Her work is rooted in Gestalt therapy, and she also practices the Mama Coach method, which helps moms coach their own kids, and she has spent 2 decades supporting individuals of all ages through emotional healing, self awareness, and personal growth. At License 360, Miry does interactive workshops and group experiences that help encourage everyone to connect and collaborate, but especially women. So, welcome, Mary, to the program.
Hi, Dalia. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so I invited you because I wanted to discuss something that I notice a lot with women, especially a lot of friends that I have. And, it can be related to relationships with their spouses or sometimes just the way they interact with other people around them. And it's about setting boundaries. And I don't know why I feel women have such a big issue with setting boundaries in comparison to men. Can you explain a little bit about this? And also explain how you began to work in this field?
Okay. So actually, both of them are connected because I was a very shy and insecure girl and very what I call obedient. Today it's called pleasing, but I took it to the next level. So I was very, very obedient. And in general, this is how girls are brought up. They are brought up to be nice, to smile, to please. Whereas with boy, there is less emphasis on that. I read not long ago that girls are raised to be nice and boys are raised to be curious. So boys go out to explore and girls have to play nice and be nice and accommodate everybody else. And I was actually very aware of my insecurities, of my lack of confidence. But well, for years I didn't understand that it's a problem. I just felt that it's a me problem, that I was anxious or not feeling like a fit in. And then when I was about 16 or 17, I first heard the word assertive. And it immediately caught my mind because I grew up with a very dominant and quite aggressive father. And in my black or white world, there were just two options, either to be very submissive or to be aggressive. And because I didn't want to be aggressive, I was submissive. Suddenly, I was introduced to a third option, which is to be assertive. And it's a actually lifelong journey. I'm 56 years old now, so 40 years of looking for this middle ground between being a person that is also knows how to interact with social encounters, and on the other hand, being able to express myself, affirm myself, state what I want and need. And the when I became a Gestalt therapist, the word Gestalt means actually the integration of everything that we are. With the classical method of psychotherapy, usually there is a therapist, actually classically they're even sitting behind the client, and all they care about is the words that come out. And in Gestalt, we care about words almost the least because we care more about how you express yourself, because your overall is the thing that gives you in a way. Since therapy is a lot of, it's not guesswork as a investigation or exploration work, but a lot of the time we ourselves are not aware of what we want or how we feel. And we are very used to controlling the words that we say, right? We're taught from young age, don't say this, this is not polite. And we know how to control it. What we don't know how to control is the way we convey our conversation, with the tone that's coming up and down, with a dominance or being more quiet, ending a sentence with an exclamation mark or a question mark. And this is what I worked with my clients. And then a few years ago, I was a member of an female entrepreneur group, and we were giving each other lectures and talks about each one of us in what her strength is. And I was listening to these really remarkable women, and I suddenly realized how insecure they were. Actually, only when we switched to Zoom, I realized it, because when we were in person, we would interact before, and also maybe the tension would go down and they would feel more at ease. But when we moved to the Zoom, there was just immediately jumping into the talk. And I realized how these women, they make themselves small by using words like, well, it's only my opinion, it's just this. There are lots of expressions and way of speaking that we use that makes us small. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you'll see it differently. Oh, I'm so sorry, but I see it this way. We apologize a lot. And when I listened to them, I said, oh my God, they're chopping off their own wings. Because I know how bright they are, I know how capable and how knowledgeable they are. But if they're going to present something to a stranger that doesn't know them, all this person will see is the insecurities. And when we convey something in an insecure way, we actually make the other person not trust our knowledge. Because I said, there's a reason this person is insecure. It's probably because they don't know what they're talking about. And this is how it all started. This is how I started to focus on giving workshops of assertive communication. Now, if we combine this together, the trying to be nice and not to displease anyone and not to upset anyone makes us take less space so that we won't rob anything from anyone. Whereas for me, assertiveness is, I'm taking my right space. I'm really happy for you to do the same. But I'm taking my right space. And if you don't want to control me, you just want to coexist with me, then you will find and take your right space. And we can be together. And actually, the best encounters come out from two people who are confident enough to take care of themselves.
So would you say that in women making themselves smaller and embodying that sense of insecurity, that's what they're projecting out to the world, that also the people who are seeing this, they also look at them as if they can override them, correct? And then also in that sense, these women don't want to rub against the person the wrong way, and they end up giving in and not being assertive. What do you think about that? Do you think that that's an accurate depiction of what goes on?
I think that a lot of it happens in the subconscious level. We talk about patriarchy, and there is patriarchy, and men benefit from it. All men, by the way, benefit from patriarchy. However, a lot of the time, this is just unconscious. Men naturally just occupy more space. One of the best examples in the metro, where each one has their seat, but there are no walls between the seats, right? So women naturally sit and close the legs, right? And you maybe have heard even your parent tell you close your legs. I never heard any parent tell your child, the boy, close your legs. And men naturally just sit and they open the legs. Okay, it's not that they sit down and say, now I'm going to occupy all their space. They don't think this way. It's not diabolic. It just comes naturally. However, you ask if men notice it with women. So if a man will sit next to another man, definitely if that person is heterosexual, they're going to close their legs. They would not want to touch the man's leg, but they don't mind touching the women's leg and invading their own space. So it is not thought about, but it comes naturally. So boys are used to occupying space, girls are used to making themselves small, and we just go with what is natural. So it's not that we are born that way, but it is the way that we are brought up very early on. And it becomes a second habit. That's why I call it natural, because it just comes naturally for us. But it's not because we were born like this. If you look at very small children and you have children, I'm sure that when they were born, your girls were just as noisy and as adventurous as the boys, right?
So in a situation like this, because I can relate, yes, that I have been in public and men have done this on purpose, and they can see sometimes that you are uncomfortable with it. And when I was younger, I was the type of person that maybe I would just be quiet because I wouldn't even know. Sometimes I didn't even know what to do in that situation. I would just be quiet, but I didn't like it, but I try to move away. And you feel like he purposefully will put his leg, for example, that's a perfect example, put his leg closer to you. And now that I'm older, that I think also I've matured in my sense of worth and everything, I think now I can handle it differently. But what would you say to someone who is young, a young girl in this time of her life where she's still a little bit, she's in the process? How do you set that boundary with, for example, a situation like that where someone is trying to infringe on your in your personal space? What would be the techniques, for example, that you should start to practice?
Okay, so my answer would have two layers because this also takes me to all the idea of mama coach and how I got to mama coach. But let's first address the young women, teenagers and women in their 20s. And it's another opportunity for us to also hail how wonderful it is to get older and know what I want and how to express what I want and need. So the first thing is actually to become aware that you are uncomfortable. Sometimes we just ignore it. Again, so much is happening in our subconscious level that we are uncomfortable, but we don't even register it. Just as sometimes we get cold, but we're busy doing something and it takes us a while to realize that the window is open and we have to go and close it. So the same happens with emotions. First, be in touch with your sensations and emotions and actually tell yourself in the head, I am uncomfortable now. This man is invading my space. The second thing I always do, even today, is take a deep breath because breathing helps me to ground myself and center myself, and I withdraw courage from it. So I take a deep breath to the lower abdomen, like we do in yoga, for instance. And then when I'm centered and grounded, then, for instance, it affects also my voice. My voice becomes more squeaky if I breathe in a more superficial way. If I breathe deep, my voice becomes deeper. A deeper voice holds more authority than a higher tone, higher pitch. And then ask yourself what it is that you want to tell them. Now, sometimes while this happens, at the same time, there is a speech here that say, how dare he? And look at these men and invading my space. And this anger actually, on one hand, it destabilizes me. And on the other hand, anger is a great motor. A lot of people, and especially women, when we lack the courage to do something, we work ourselves up in order to get so angry that we are able to say something. So ideally, actually, I don't want to get to a point that I'm angry. I want to be able to express myself before I'm even angry, just because I know what is my space and I want people to respect my space and I'm going to respect it. So the words will be, excuse me, you're invading my space, or do you mind closing your legs? But the question is, how am I going to say it? Because if I will say, excuse me, you're invading my space, how does that sound? Not very convincing, because I ended the sentence with a high pitch. It sounds like a question. Or can you close your legs? Whereas if I go with a lower tone in the end, I say, can you close your legs? Can you hear the difference and how it impacts you when you hear it? So when I feel centered, I am capable of thinking how I want to sound. I remind myself I want to end the sentence with a lower tone. And I say, can you close your legs? Or please close your legs. It's even when I say, can you close your legs? It doesn't sound like a question, right? It sounds like an affirmation. Okay? If I am centered and I know this is my space, because in the metro it's marked more or less, and you can see that they're sitting in angle and I'm not, then I know I'm in the right. Now I have to understand that when I'm in the right, I have also the right to express it. So this is how I do it, actually very simple. The other thing is, the shorter sentences, the more impact they have. It's a bit like using the same motor to carry a short train or a long train. If the train is shorter, then the motor can carry it with more strength, more power. Use short sentences, not complex sentences. Can you please close your legs? Excuse me, you're invading my space. You can even omit the excuse me if you will ask me, because I'm not asking him to excuse me. Okay, but this is what we are trying to do. You see, even that I work with that, naturally the excuse me comes in. And this is how breathing helps, because it helps me to center myself. The other thing, by the way, is to use your own ears. Well, only when I heard myself saying, excuse me, I said, I don't want to say excuse me. Okay? But it takes time and practice. This is how it starts.
So the key is to be assertive, to monitor your intonation when you're making the command, and in a sense, not worry about being overly polite, not being too polite. Because I think a lot of women, we tend to still want to appear polite. Do you agree that sometimes this is an issue for us to confront certain issues with people around us?
Absolutely. And we talk a lot about the distinction between being nice and being kind. Okay? So first of all, the question is, what does it mean to be polite? The first thing that comes to head is, the British royal family. They were brought up on the best manners, but when they ask for something, they do not apologize, right? They will, for instance, I can imagine the late Queen telling someone, can you please clear the dishes now? Okay, she will not say, excuse me, and she will be very polite. I'm sure that the royal family actually doesn't treat their service people like servants, but treat them with respect. This is part of being polite, by the way. And that's why I don't see them as mutually exclusive. The question is, what do we see as polite? How do we define it? And I want to take you back to this black or white vision of I'm either really accommodating or I'm rude and aggressive person. And there is a middle ground. In Hebrew, it's called the golden way, the golden line, finding the happy middle point, and every person have their own middle point between being submissive or passive and being aggressive. And if we look at the difference between being nice and being kind, right? A lot of the time, again, especially girls, and you're American, right? And I know in the US, a lot of the time parents send their kids off to school telling them, be nice with the other kids, play nice. So play nice is, you always have to be nice. Whereas be kind is be considerate, see also the other person, be caring, but it doesn't say you always have to be smiley and pleasant, regardless the situation and regardless how the other person treats you. Okay, so this is what I think it's important that especially women will bear in mind. I would like to be a kind person. I see it as a virtue. I don't always have to be nice. And I had a terrible work unlearning that, meaning unlearning the fact that I always have to be nice.
Okay. And also, another thing that I was considering, that even when we sometimes express ourselves, there are moments where afterwards we feel guilty about it. How could we overcome that? Expressing ourselves and not feeling guilty for expressing ourselves and our desires and what we want.
So again, it's a lot of unlearning. right? Always say that I think that children are born perfect. They're very good at expressing their emotions and their needs. They don't always express it in an adequate way, which is why they're being punished by the adults. And this is how they learn that something is wrong with expressing themselves. And this, by the way, is what brought me to Mama Coach, because I realized how much work unlearning takes in adults. And I said, I have to start really young. I want to start before they form the bad habits of playing themselves small, of shrinking themselves, of thinking that they're unworthy or feeling unworthy, of not trusting themselves. So about the guilt, again, awareness is the key here. Actually, awareness is the ABC of Gestalt work, because if I'm not aware of things that happen inside me, I cannot address them. So be aware that I feel guilty. Then I can have a conversation with myself and ask myself, do I think that anything that I said was wrong? Am I allowed to take space? Am I allowed to express my needs or my emotions or my opinions? So do I really feel guilty, or is it just a reflex? Because again, that too becomes an automatic behavior, which becomes a second nature. That by nature, just as they say, as soon as a baby is born, there is a guilty mother that is born. Not because she's guilty, but because she feels guilty a priori. Before doing anything, she's already guilty. And we have to unlearn this, because guilt, by the way, is a tool. It's used by many religions. It's used by many parents and teachers and other adults, because it's a great way to dominate people. If you make them feel guilty, they will make themselves small, because it's such a terrible feeling. It's so consuming to feel guilty. And I remember feeling guilty. I actually remember myself sometimes going and apologizing to people for being rude, just because I wasn't so nice to them and they didn't understand what I was talking about. In my head, I was so rude and they didn't notice anything, because even my rude was so much still nicer than the average. But in my head, because of my reference point compared to how nice I used to be, that was rude. So ask yourself, was I rude? Did I say anything that is hurtful? And then, but that requires a lot of work. I mean, I like to really reflect on things. What does it mean to take my own space, for instance? How worthy you feel, how allowed you are to yourself, how permissive to take space. If you think that something is wrong with that, and another example is, for instance, don't eat all the cake. There's one piece of cookie and a friend is asking for a piece and you break it, and usually it's not perfectly half and half. Who's going to get the bigger piece? Usually we are brought to up on give the bigger piece to the other person and take the smaller piece, right? And we always take the smaller piece, always. And one day I started asking, but why? Just because I'm the one who broke the cookie? So yeah, I wouldn't like to be the person that always takes the bigger piece, but I also wouldn't like to be the person that always takes the smaller piece. I actually try and find a balance. I realize it, for instance, when I go to the beach, there's a very narrow path, and then you get off it and you're on the grass. It's not that you fall to an abyss, but you're on the grass. And when I come across with someone, usually, unless we shrink ourselves, one of us has to step down to the grass. And I try even there to be very conscious. And I want to yield sometimes, because I want to be that kind of person who gives the leeway to another person. But I want to make sure that it's not my default, that I don't always do that just because I'm supposed to be polite and accommodating. Okay, so start by asking yourself, what does it mean to be polite? To say, excuse me, because I'm calling the attention of the waiter, this coffee is not hot enough. Can you warm it up? Or can you get me another coffee? How does that sound to you? Was I,
Yeah,
was I rude?
and no, no, and it's funny because I recall that many times I was the type of person that I would say, "Oh, yeah, it's a little cold, but I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to fuss too much, you know." This is something that, and I want to ask you, like with the parents and the moms, because I was like this until I became independent and came to Spain. That was basically exactly how I was the first, let's say, I guess 22, 23 years of my life. So with Mama Coach, how do I just, from your observation, when you're coaching the moms to train them not to do this, but how do these patterns begin with children? Like, are there any examples of things that we do with our kids that we don't notice, but that in a way is teaching them to feel smaller than they are without unconsciously, because obviously we're doing things that we were taught. Like, what are some examples of that?
So first of all, in the last years, we are not speaking anymore about raising children. We are speaking about raising humans. Children are going to be children actually for a very short period of their life. And the rest of their life, let's say until you're 20, you're a child, more or less. And then if life expectancy is at least 80, in Spain, for instance, it's very high. So it's 89. So you still have 3/4 of your life at least to go as an adult. What kind of adult you want to raise? And Mama Coach actually was designed to prepare our kids to live in a world that is also constantly and rapidly changing, and we can't even always foresee how it's going to look like. And that is why we have to give children tools and not knowledge. I mean, knowledge is important, and we want them to have general knowledge, of course. I think that having vocabulary, having knowledge supports also the sense of self-confidence. But the main idea is tools. And again, it requires a lot of awareness, self-awareness, because we have this automatic behavior and answer. How often a person who swore to themselves as children that they will never do that, say something to the child, say, "Oh my God, I sound like my mother." So become aware of that. Don't feel guilty now, okay? Because by the way, as I said earlier, guilt is something that is so consuming that it doesn't leave space for anything else. So a parent will be so busy feeling guilty, they will not think about the solution of how do they want to improve it. So when you do that, you said, okay, I made a mistake. One of my favorite people in the world is Maya Angelou. And she said, you did the best you could. Now you know better, do better. So it just slipped. You said a mama thing, an old mother thing, and then you heard it and you say, I don't want to sound like this and I don't want to talk like this to my children. And now that I'm aware of it, I'm going to be more conscious and I will try not to say it. So how do we do that? There is lately, I don't know if you've seen it in Instagram, I've seen several accounts that do that. It's parents that sit with a younger child and they use the very ancient but also recent expressions, and they ask the child to finish the sentence. So for instance, they say, a child is supposed to be seen. How would you end it?
Children are meant to be seen and not heard.
Exactly. Okay, so we were brought up the same way. But the children say they need to be seen and be listened to because they grew up with parents who made them feel that they are important enough to be heard. Now, this, by the way, also is connected to assertiveness because a lot of the time we think that if I listen to you, that means I have to obey you. And that is why politics look the way that it does, and even the public arena looks the way that it does. People do not listen to each other. They're terrified that this person will make me change my mind or will force me to do something. And I say, but I trust myself. I can listen to you. And if I disagree, if what you say goes against my values, I would just say, I heard you. I still think differently. Very easy for me. But when I'm insecure, I'm so afraid because I don't hold my ground. So it's very easy to invade me and take over my ground. Okay. The same happens with parents. One of the most famous expression, and especially I hear it, I watch a lot of content in coming from the US. And one of the expression is, don't talk back. Don't talk back to me. What's the difference between answering, responding, and talking back? When it's a child, you will tell them, talk back. When it's an adult, they just respond to what you say, right? But we teach kids from very young age. We tell them, don't talk back. For instance, if a child is expressing an emotion that is uncomfortable for us, we try to override it. If they're sad, then we either try to cheer them up without allowing them simply to feel sadness, because any emotion just wears off after a few minutes. Or we even shout at them, I'll give you a reason to cry, right? Another old expression that some parents unfortunately still use. Whereas nowadays in Mama Coach and in many respectful parenting groups, they say, I understand that you're really upset. You wanted another candy. You wanted to watch another video. I understand that. But we agreed, or I think that for your health and for your benefit, it's not good for you to have another candy. But I sympathize. Okay. So the child learns two things. He learns that there is a difference between feeling something and expressing it. Okay. For instance, you're angry, you're allowed to go and scream in your room. You're allowed to hit a pillow if you want. What I will not allow you is to harm yourself or me or someone else. Okay? I will not allow you to break things. And I will help you not to break things. But I understand the frustration. This is so frustrating. Okay? So I respect their emotions. I don't make them feel like something is wrong just for wanting something. I mean, I walk down the street and I see a beautiful dress and I say, oh, I wish I could have this dress. Okay? Because I'm not a child, I also know how much money I have in the bank and can I afford it or not. And I know how many dresses I have in my closet and I know that I don't need another one. Okay? So, but I am giving myself permission to covet this dress, to say, oh, this is so beautiful, I wish I had it. And there was another voice that said, yeah, but I'm not going to have it. And it's fine. And it's a bit frustrating. And I wish I could have all the beautiful dresses in the world. I wouldn't, by the way, but let's say that I wish that. And it's fine. And I'm not acting upon it. Okay? So the idea is to respect the child's emotion and show empathy and understanding, to know in yourself and then teach the child to see the difference between understanding someone and accepting their opinion. I understand your point of view. I see differently. I can have both. I can really see your point of view. Okay? But it doesn't mean that I think exactly the way that you do, because I have a different point of view. And giving space where children are allowed to express their emotions and their thoughts and their needs and listen to them. Again, it doesn't mean you always have to do as they ask, but you do have to listen. You do have to make them have to. But ideally, if you will make them feel like their opinion is important, that they have the right to express themselves, you're not going to crush them. If I said earlier that kids are born perfect, then kids do know. You see 3-year-old girls also. I love looking at fierce girls. I just love it. And there's always a little thought, I hope they won't crush her. Because at some point, by the age of 6, 7, and latest, when puberty begins, girls make themselves smaller because they don't want to overshadow boys, because they are hearing around that it's not feminine and they start to care about being feminine. A 3-year-old girl doesn't care about feminine. She can be very coquettic, like I want lipstick like mom, but she doesn't understand what feminine means. But when she gets a bit older, she hears it's not feminine to be dominant. Only girls are called opinionated. For instance, when a child expresses their opinion, if you tell them, oh, you're so opinionated, can you hear my tone? Compare it with, You're very opinionated. What's the difference? Can you hear a difference between both?
One is being sent as if it's a criticism, versus the other one is like a little bit more as a compliment or balance.
At least stating a fact. You're very opinionated. You have very strong opinion. When people say that to me, I said, yes, I do. And I'm so proud of it because for years I did allow myself to express my opinions. So it's being aware of these things. For me, one of the keys is ask yourself if you would talk that way to your best friend, the way that you speak to your children. Because we tend to be, even to the cashier. I remember having arguments with my father and asking, even demanding that he will say thank you and please when he asked me to render some services for him. And I said, why aren't you saying that? And he said, do you want me to talk to you like the cashier in the supermarket? I said, if you're only polite with the cashier in the supermarket, yes, then treat me like the cashier in the supermarket. You want me to prepare a cup of coffee? I'll be happy. I would like you to recognize that it's a service that I'm giving you and I don't have to give it to you. You're asking me to do something that it's not part of my job description. My job description is to be a child and do my homework, right? And be polite. But my job description, for instance, is not taking care of my brother and sister. That was actually a service that my parents always took for granted and abused. But actually, I wasn't born to take care of my younger brother and sister. They brought them to the world. They're the ones supposed to take care of them. I wasn't able to think like that as a child because I was raised to be obedient. I started thinking about it much, much later. And I think it's wonderful for all the children to take care of the brother and sister. It teaches them so much. I just don't want it to be taken for granted like it's their job, because it's not. Okay, and this is the thing. If you ask a friend to do a favor for you, and if she's a close friend, you do expect her to do that, right? But you're not going to take it for granted. You would still say please, and after she will do that, you will thank her for that. You will acknowledge her effort, her service, right? Do that with a child. Make them feel like they mean to you, just as an adult, that they are important. And I know now I'm starting, it sounds like a lecture instead of a conversation, but this is something I'm so passionate about because it breaks my heart to see children hunched because the burden of their parents' expectations and the way that they are treated, instead of feeling like I have a place in this world. I belong here just like anyone else. And it's in the hands of the parents to do that. And one last thing, a lot of the time I hear people say, oh, I'm just preparing them to the world. And there's a great sentence that says, don't be your child's first bully. Bullying a child doesn't prepare them to know how to defend themselves in front of bullying. It's the opposite. It teaches them this is what they deserve. It teaches them that they deserve to be talked down to, that they deserve to be mocked, that they don't deserve to express their opinion, that they are worthless. So do the opposite. Make your child feel important. Now, because I was mentioning again the black or white, and our brain is very lazy, so our brain really likes looking at things as black or white. The other thing is we have entitled children. Make the child feel important doesn't mean treat them like a prince. So first of all, please don't even call your children a prince, because it might get to their head. I mean, I loved it when I allow it until today when someone called me a princess. Okay, but even a princess, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Is it a compliment? Is it a criticism when we call someone princess? So the same with the child. When I talk about feeling important, now maybe I will have a different comparison. I can compare it to a close friend of yours, or I can compare it to, for instance, treating a grandparent, right? People get along better with their grandparents than with their parent. Initially, they tend to respect them more because they are elder. We don't treat them as kings necessarily, depending on the culture, but we don't treat them as king, and yet we want to take care of them and we want to listen to their stories. and we want to respect them. And how are children going to grow if we will give them the same treatment? I mean, your grandparents don't feel entitled; they just feel cared and respected, and important for us, right? When I unfortunately lost the only two grandparents I had when I was very young, so I didn't have it. I'm very jealous of people who are adults and have grandparents, and I see how they call them and go and visit them and treat them with a lot of respect and gentleness, and without being submissive on one hand and without adulation on the other hand. And this is what I recommend also for treating children. Make them feel that they are important for you, that what they have to tell you is important. When they talk to you, put down your phone. Don't shout to them from the other room. I assume you wouldn't shout to your partner from the other room, hey, can you do this? Well, maybe once, but not have a full conversation shouting from one room to another. You have something to say. You go to the child and you tell them that. That's respect. And this teaches a child that they deserve this kind of attention and attitude and behavior. And then when they go out, this is what they will expect and demand from other people. You treat me nice. Or not nice, kindly. Treat me kindly.
And I agree with that so much. I know sometimes it's very difficult because, I'm a parent, and especially if you are like around, I'm 40, and I've heard both sides. The sides of the parents, like, you need to just be seen and not heard, and all of this. And some people sometimes, ridicule asking children how they feel. They call it gentle parenting. They make it seem as if it's either one or the other, and it's not about, like you said, having the child do whatever they want and having no boundaries, but it's about being sympathetic to them. And unfortunately, a lot of times our family members or our children get the worst of us, right? Like you said, like with your dad, they get the worst of us because we can control ourselves. If we were in our job or with a boss or anybody else, you wouldn't talk to them sometimes the way that sometimes we talk to our children or the people, even sometimes our spouses. So the question of just trying to have respect is a key issue. And also, like, even from a spiritual and emotional viewpoint, that whole concept of instilling in your child that they are worthy, that they are worthy, that they are important, that they are allowed to express how they feel and acknowledging it. What do you think, or what do you notice from your experience happens when it could be women or it can also be children are not allowed to express how they feel, that they're not allowed to just be able to speak to another individual and have that kind of compassion or someone to listen to them? How does that affect them both emotionally and what do you think spiritually?
So as someone who lived that on my skin, I can tell you that I felt that my emotions don't matter, that my opinions don't matter, although it's not 200%. One of the things that saved me, and actually doesn't usually happen with children who are raised that way, is that I was really loved at school, first by my teachers, but mainly from my classmates. And I say mainly because actually they were my reference point. I wanted to please the teachers that they won't be angry with me, but my friends were my classmates. And 2 years ago, there was a reunion of my elementary school. And it was so, we were 80 in the group, more or less, of the 80 kids in the same age level. And for me, it was so beautiful to see when I would see people ask, is Miry in the group? Is Miry in the group? And it felt so good that people that I haven't seen in 40 years, they still, or more than 40 years, they remember me, they miss me, they want to be in touch with me. And actually, it made me understand a lot of things suddenly in retrospect. For instance, that school actually saved maybe my sanity, because I had a balance and there was a place where I did feel respected. And although kids did call me professor, I was a bookworm. It was never as a mocking word. It was out of respect, and that was lovely. And there were days that I would play like any other child, but I was also a very serious child. So there were days that I would just stay in the class and keep on reading even in recess. So that was very different, but nobody ever mocked me for that. Unlike home, for instance, and whenever I behaved differently from my father, he would mock me. I was a very empathetic child, and if I would cry, seeing a hungry child, there were then photos of a country that doesn't exist, Biafra in Africa, and I would see these little children that they're so skinny with a belly, and I started crying, and I don't remember that, by the way. I was 2 or 3 years old, and my parents kept telling me as a story that something is wrong with me because I was crying, looking at hungry children, and I can start crying looking at photos of hungry children now. So, but now I can tell myself I'm human and I'm humane, and this is the normal thing. It's normal to see little children suffering and dying from hunger. This is the normal thing. So when we talk about how children, well, unfortunately, children have less tools than adults, and that's why there is a difference between being an adult and a child. One of the things that really helped me is that while I still lived in Israel, is that every Saturday I would go and have lunch with my family. And a lot of the time I would leave the house crying because of my father. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm 30 years old, I'm doing therapy, I'm thriving everywhere else, and at home I go back to be a 15-year-old that her father can make her cry. And it was devastating for me. But that was also the strength, because with time I kept telling myself, this is not my home. I have my own home. I can leave. I'm only here for 3 hours. And if I really want, I can just decide that next week I'm not coming. This is a privilege that children don't have. And because, and of course, this is the way it's designed, parents are supposed to be the protectors of their kids. A child would rather think that something is wrong with them than to think that something is wrong with their parent. I'm an atheist, as you know, but I have a lot of respect for people who have faith, because I actually think it's a natural human thing to do. We want to believe that there is someone that is responsible. I mean, we live in an unjust world, and it can be very painful sometimes. And we need to think and hope and believe that someone will make sure that this will be better. And if not in this life, then maybe in the next life. So this is very similar for children. Children need to feel that there is that the parents are just, right? In spite of being Jewish, I don't subscribe to the angry, resentful God. I mean, I much prefer actually Jesus and their teaching of love than the very that God that holds a grudge and punishes and revenge. But still, even Jewish people, they always believe that in the afterlife it will be better, that they will get, for instance, their prize for being good people. And no one would like to think, no one will believe in an unjust God, right? Even when God is angry in the Old Testament, he's right. And he's just, he's not just being arbitrary, right? This is what we want to think and believe. And the same with parents. So when a parent is unjust and arbitrary, because we're also human, we're not gods, a child would still take the blame on themselves, just to keep on thinking that the parent must be just and right and loving. Okay? Because the alternative that my parent is an unstable, unkind, unloving, unjust person is unbearable, because then there's nobody to protect me. And for me, one of the most important things is repair. For me, it's I can't exaggerate of how repair is important, in the sense that I think I'm 56 years old. My father is dead already, but I have a very flawed mother. More than flawed, actually. My mother wasn't just making mistakes, she wasn't a very kind mother, or a very a loving mother, and I never heard her say I'm sorry. Not even once, not when she lost her temper and took out on me her anger from her life. I remember only when I was 17 and going to therapy, my therapist told me, your mother is a human, and a lot of what is happening in her life, inside her and around her, is absolutely nothing to do with you. Maybe she had a fight with your father. Maybe she has unsatisfying sexual life. Maybe she's frustrated with being a stay-at-home mom instead of using her intelligence and applying it in a workplace that I think would have made her, by the way, happier. And it never occurred to me until that point. So when children see a parent angry, and especially if they shout at them, they feel guilty. We're going back to the guilt, this thing that it's so hard to shake off. And a parent capable of going and saying, I'm sorry I shouted at you. I was wrong. You were right. Even if you misbehave, I shouldn't have shouted this loud. I shouldn't have used mocking words or curses or things like this. This can go a long way because we all make mistakes. We are all human. I do not expect parents to be inhumane. What I do expect them is to be adults and to acknowledge their mistake and admit them to the child. And then the child doesn't feel that it's their fault. I'm sorry. And this is what prepares them to the world. We talked a bit on the phone before, and one of the we see the connection between children and especially women who don't know how to set boundaries and protect themselves. I was raised to not open my mouth when someone else shouted at me. I was raised to automatically feel guilty about any person who's unhappy, which means that I had, I'm sorry, I had partners, for instance, that when they were in a bad mood, I thought that it's my job to be their cheerleader and their therapist and their mother and take care of them, instead of saying, I'm here if you need anything, but your mood is your responsibility. I'm your partner, absolutely. I'm going to support you. If you need to talk to me, I will listen gladly. If you said about something, I'll be happy to make cookies for you. But it's not my job to make you feel good. But at home, I grew up with parents that would show me in words, by the way, actual words and in actions, that it's my fault that they're in a bad mood, that it's my fault that they are angry. I could, I don't know, wash the dishes and break a plate, and my father would scream at me, a father that never washed dishes himself. Okay, you wash dishes, you break stuff. But he would shout at me like I did something, like I did it on purpose. Okay, so when someone is angry with me, my boss, my partner, or a good friend, I'm used to immediately feeling guilty, thinking that something is wrong with me, instead of saying, hey, yeah, I made a mistake. Don't raise your voice. I understand. I admit it. I will try very hard not to do it again. I wasn't brought up like that. I wasn't brought up to think that I'm right and that's it. If you grow up with parents that don't give you space, then when you have a partner and say, oh, you're so silly, just shut up. I accept it instead of saying, excuse me, this is unacceptable and I'm not going to tolerate it. So you either change your behavior or goodbye. And sometimes I even not give them a chance to change their behavior, because I would think that something is basically very wrong here if they think that they are allowed to do that. But I can only have that if I was brought up thinking that no one can treat me badly. And if they do, it's a glitch. It's because they had a very bad day and they didn't know how to control themselves, and now they're going to repair and say that they're sorry. And this is when we talk about my right. For instance, if I'm going out with I would say a guy because it doesn't happen to me anymore. But when I was because when I was younger, now I'm using the word men. But let's say in the 20s, we still use the word guys and girls. And if a man would do something that will not be awful, but still be inappropriate or at least unpleasant for me, it would be very hard for me to say no. I remember letting a guy kiss me at the end of a first date just because it felt easier than saying no to them. By the way, they weren't aggressive, they weren't rude. It was just saying goodbye, and they were trying their luck or trying something, and they kissed me. Okay, the poor guy didn't know that something is wrong because I pretending like everything is okay because it was my job not to make anyone feel discomfort because this is how I was raised. When I was raised by my father, by the way, not only he asked me to make coffee and tea for him, he actually at some point started to shout at me for not giving him a cup of coffee before he even asked for it. So why do I always have to ask you to prepare a cup of coffee for me? Why aren't you just bringing me a cup of coffee every hour? So it's my job to guess your thoughts, emotions, and needs now. So of course, I was doing the same with my friends and with my partners. It's my job to even guess what they want. So instead of concentrating on what I want, I'm busy catering to their need. So if a woman is going out on a date, she needs to, and now I'm very happy of these messages that they are all around us, but still not enough. And no is no. And you can say no at any point. You can invite a guy to your apartment and say no. You can invite them to the bedroom and then change your mind. How often were you very hungry and you went to a restaurant and you even imagined the food, and suddenly when it got there, you ate less than half because suddenly you weren't hungry or you didn't feel like having it, or when you saw the dish, it didn't look the way that you expected it. And I'm not just talking about physically seeing a man and suddenly thinking they don't look the way I thought, but it's also chemically, emotionally. I don't feel safe with this guy. I don't feel like being with that person. We always also have to remember we still live in a man's world, and men and women are different. And for instance, men are a lot more visual. Men are a lot more physical than women. It's a fact. It's a scientific fact. I'm a sworn feminist, but I know that it's a fact. And because of that, and because of our anatomy, okay, being a woman is fragile. I let someone else penetrate me. And by the way, I had these conversations with homosexual men friends, and they told me there is something very fragile about it, very vulnerable. There's also something very powerful in being vulnerable. But anatomically, I'm like, there is nothing more invading my personal space than having heterosexual relationship. And because of that, women really have to feel safe there because I'm letting you penetrate me. I hope it's not becoming too much of a R rating, but because of that, I need to feel safe. Men don't think about these things because they're built different anatomically and mentally, and also socially. But women do have to think about that. So I need to first and foremost feel safe. And if for some reason I don't feel safe, and again, I don't have to think that this man is a villain. I just think that they are not very sensitive and considerate. I'm not sure I want to let them really inside me, both emotionally, mentally, and physically. Okay, this is how it is. Just as when I'm meeting a person and they are, I don't know, they're arrogant or they're indiscreet, I wouldn't tell them my most discreet secrets, right? Because I cannot trust them. I would not let them in me emotionally and mentally. So the
And
same
and
way.
and I want to say, I think that a lot of women, they sometimes acknowledge and they know that this person who they're with, they don't feel safe with them. But again, they have the insecurity, or maybe they think, well, I'm with, for example, I'm married to this person, or and they give in and they don't express the things that they want of this person, and they just make do with mediocrity or being, half satisfied with the person. And I'm talking about emotionally as well, because if the person that they're with is someone who is not compassionate, uh, is not someone they can trust, they still are giving a lot of themselves sometimes to someone who doesn't deserve it.
And by the way, it doesn't. I'm also a couple therapist, but it's not what I'm focusing on now. But a lot of the time, again, a man, and I'm saying a man because there is a fact that most of the house chores, even in the most progressed Scandinavian countries, are on women, and definitely the mental load that now finally it is acknowledged that it is a terrible burden. So my partner doesn't have to be a villain for me to feel unheard. So when a man says she's punishing me because I didn't throw the garbage, it's not the garbage. 21st century, I can throw my own garbage. It's the fact that I ask you to do something and I ask you to do it several times and you don't respect my wishes, my needs, my asks. And this is why I don't feel like having sex with you. It's not a punishment. It's when I walk down the street and someone is smiling to me, I feel like smiling back. But when I walk down the street and someone goes like this, my tendency is not to smile. It just doesn't come naturally. I'm not punishing them. You don't waken me, you don't trigger in me a smile when I see this kind of face. So the same thing, if you come home and you don't care about how was my day, and we shout orders or we share chores, and it's like a shift. How was the day? Yeah, you got home, so now you have to shower the kids. There is no tender word, there is no caring. How did you even start to think that I would like to make love to you, right? This is how we call it, to make love to you. Men usually don't understand that a foreplay is not just playing with my ear. A foreplay starts a lot earlier. When you tell me, oh, you look so beautiful today. I don't remember seeing this dress. Oh, I love this dress. I haven't seen you wearing it in a long time. This is a foreplay. I feel seen. So this is the parallel. That is why I think I told you that Mama Coach is the idea of coaching mothers both to be coaches and to be the coaches of their kids. The same woman that I teach her to hold high standards, or what I hope one day we'll call basic standards, that I deserve to be seen as a human, I also would like you to apply to your kids. So yes, you would like your partner to see you as a woman. When clients come to see me, almost always at the end of the first session, I say almost always because it's not always the case, but very often is, remember when you were dating? When was the last time you were flirting with each other? When was the last time that you made the other person feel attractive? When did you last feel seen by your partner and not just as a team member on a submarine exchanging chores and lists of to do? And the same thing. So, but it starts with me feeling worthy. Okay? And it can happen in different ways. The ideal way is, of course, to be brought up like this, like you are worthy of respect and care and love and attention. This is the ideal. And if not, it can be, of course, through therapy. But it can also be, there's so many inspiring speakers nowadays. You just have to make sure that you follow them. Please follow strong women. As I mentioned a few times, I'm 56 years old. When I was growing up, there wasn't any inspiring woman. We had a female prime minister, by the way, when I was 6 to 8, I think. But she was a terrible, aggressive person. So I didn't want to be like her. I still hold that we still didn't have a female prime minister. We had a male prime minister in a skirt, because she was very, not what we call, she didn't have soft skills. She was very intelligent, also emotionally intelligent, but she was very rude and aggressive, and I didn't like that. but I intentionally looking for inspiring women that are strong and that they are compassionate. That's why I mention Maya Angelou. I like Michelle Obama. I like Oprah. By the way, I don't know if it's relevant, but one day I realized that most of the women that and men, some of the men like Barack Obama, like Nelson Mandela, and Martin Luther King, I suddenly said, this is very strange that a lot of these people are Black. But the thing is that Black are like women, are like children, are like people who are not heterosexual. We are minority, all of us. And because of that, we know how it feels to be left out or to be belittled. And becoming stronger through that, overcoming that, without becoming resentful and angry and aggressive, then again, I can see that point of view. I can understand why people are aggressive and angry. I don't want to become that kind of person. I don't want to be belligerent, even if people around me did do terrible things to me. And for me, it's to see these people who manage to overcome very difficult things and still maintain their values, their core. It makes them wiser without making them bitter or aggressive. But I'm looking for these people. I want to be surrounded by them, and definitely today with the way that people speak in the public. And by the way, I am guilty of that too. I find myself, I grew up in a very political house, so I like to read about politics, and then I go back and forth in a way that is sometimes very aggressive with other commentators, and then I feel dirty. I said, I don't want to be this aggressive person. I don't want to be this rude person. I have to remember to disengage with them. They are terrible people. I'm going to block them. Maybe sometimes I'm going to report if they say really awful things that are illegal even. But I don't want to be engaged in that. It's very tempting, right? Because somebody is hitting me and yeah.
Yeah, of course, because when we engage and we partake in just giving back what that energy that you see if people are being negative around you, you're also playing into it. You're also being drained into that energy. And also, I like the point that you were also making. It's not our responsibility to, worry about other people's emotions. Like, we need to worry about how we feel in the sense that we are not responsible for other people. So if we have an adult as well, in case if it's like the parent, like sometimes when you feel that you can't do this, or with your partner, you can't say that, you can't express yourself, it almost feels as if like it's conditional, that we are going to be judged by the other person, or the other person's not going to look at us the same way or love us the same way when we are just merely expressing ourselves. And also, I do agree with you a lot with what you mentioned about that you tend to notice the similarities between a lot of different groups of people that are minorities, because even that concept of like making yourself feel small for other people who in society are supposed to be better than you and things like this. Like, I think all of these kinds of things are phenomena that happen in our experiences that sometimes we don't even recognize or realize that this all contributes to our sense of self-worth. And as well, I know that you, as you mentioned before, you're not Christian, but I've personally enjoyed this conversation immensely. I think you've had a lot of insights to offer, and I would like at another occasion probably invite you back to even go into the discussion on couples and how women can feel more secure in speaking with their partner without holding back, because I think sometimes when women especially hold back, it it affects not only your relationship in the house with your partner, but if you have children, also your children feel the tensions and all of these kinds of negative energies when these kinds of conflicts are happening around them. So, well, thank you so much, Miry, for coming.
I would like to say one last sentence, please.
Yes, yes.
Although I know I talked a lot. Thank you so much for giving me this room. You're a very sympathetic listener. One of the slogans of Mama Coach is, what are you teaching your child? So when a woman is being submissive or not expressing her emotions, please remember that it's not only harming your own self-care and self-love, you're also teaching your children that you're not supposed to express your needs and your emotions and your thoughts. And do you really want to send your kids to the world feeling like this?
Exactly, because that you will in the end be the influence that they have in their lives, and they will tend to repeat the same behaviors and patterns, and that's how we develop these kind of generational traumas and generational habits. So thank you so much, Miry, for coming on the show. I love talking to you. Be sure to check out her links in the podcast, and be sure to subscribe to sacredmindshift.com to keep up to date with all of the podcasts and events that are coming up in the future. Thank you, and God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dalia. Bye. Take care.